Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Timothy Dernlan with the Association of Classical Christian Schools. Dr. Quentin Johnston set up this webinar for us. We're really excited about it. We have Dr. Dave Seibel, who will be our main presenter today. This is the Doctorum Classical Christian Leadership Training webinar, and it is being put on by the Association of Classical Christian Schools. We're here to support schools. We're here to support schools in a variety of ways, schools that want to advance intentional Christian education through classical education, classical pedagogy. This program that we have set up and that we're going to present to you today is intended to train heads of school, but it falls under a larger umbrella. It falls under our Institute for Classical Christian Leadership. That institute that we have within the ACCS trains startup schools. There's a 4-month program for that. This Doctorum program trains heads of school in a year-long program, and you're going to hear about that today. We also train school boards. We're developing a program like this for our school boards. And we also have individual and school-wide consulting that we do for school boards, for heads of school. We also do teacher training. And so our regional teacher training centers all fall under that institute. This specifically is our Doctorum program. And each of these things that we talked about, there are active processes being developed for certification as an administrator, certification in school board, certification in teacher training, and other things. So today, we're focused on the Doctorum, which is our head of school training. Dr. Dave Seibel has been taking 18 heads of school through our program this year. We're going to launch our next program July 7th, and you're going to find out about the program. That's a year-long program, really designed specifically for what you do. One last thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Seibel. We've done a lot of work in this. This was 2 years of research, development, writing, filming, and it's a really robust program. And so I hope you enjoy it. Dave, Dr. Seibel, good to have you here.
Good to be with you, Dr. Timothy Dernlan.
Oh, and one more thing. I'm so sorry. Throw in questions to the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. I'll be back at the end of the webinar in about 25 minutes or so, and we'll talk to Dave about any questions you have about the program.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Tim. Yes, my name is David Seibel. My last name rhymes with Bible. It is my privilege to lead Doctorum. I am also the head of school of Coram Academy in Carmel, Indiana, an ACCS accredited school. Other things that I've gotten to do are the Accelerator, which is helping startup schools. I have a course on Classical U, a book entitled Growing a Classical School. But one of my favorite things that I get to do is supporting other heads of school because it's hard work and it's isolating work. And the thrust behind the Doctorum in many ways is to extend the longevity of our heads of school. The average tenure is not as long as it should be. It is a demanding job, and you need to have a strong immune system to be an effective, long-standing head of school. And so Doctorum, with the Lord's help, is an instrument that we're asking him to use for the expansion and the solidification of our movement. So I am going to take you through in this webinar the content of Doctorum just to give you a preview. This will be about 25 minutes or so, and then we can do questions at the end. I thought it would be better than what I'm about to say just to have someone who is almost done with Doctorum join us. So I'm going to have Aaron Hansen join us now. Aaron Hansen is the headmaster of Mirus Academy in Maine, and I've asked him just to share a little bit about his background, why he believes the Doctorum could be helpful to you. Aaron, I'll turn it over to you. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I do think it was pretty providential that the Doctorum was launched this year. I am the founding headmaster of our school, and I've been serving in that field for 10 years. But probably like many founding headmasters, I was actually involved in a lot of the teaching. And so when I saw that the Doctorum was launched, I was excited because even though I'm not an administrator by heart, I realized the need for that to free me up so that I wasn't given over to the tyranny of the urgent and leading in that style. And so that's what I came to the program with, and I was really excited to jump in with that.
That's helpful. On this next slide, we have the structure of the whole course. So we have a calendrical model. So that means that each of the months corresponds to something that heads of school or trustees would be doing in that given month. So in this webinar, we're going to be going through these. And Aaron, you're familiar with these because you've seen the content and gone through it. Doctorum is really three things. It's a cohort of peers who have the same or similar jobs from around the country. It's also one-on-one monthly coaching with myself or Dr. Timothy Dernlan or one of our other coaches. And then beyond the cohort and the coaching, it's the content. So these are the content areas. And usually with a consultancy or school improvement plan, you'll get consultancy/coaching, or you'll get content, or you'll get a cohort, but rarely do you get all three in one program. And so that's why we believe Doctorum is helpful. Aaron, for you, which of these aspects of the calendrical model has been particularly helpful to you in your school?
Well, actually, I would say just coming at it with a calendrical model was really helpful for me to organize. I'll just be honest, my initial fear was that a doctorum program might just be seeking to produce CEO heads of school, but really having a calendrical model I found really helpful in organizing so that it could free me up to do the other aspects of my job, so I wasn't concerned about what was coming next all the time. So just the model alone was really helpful to me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'm a big believer in the calendrical structure. Thank you, Aaron. Aaron will be joining us at the end when we do Q&A. Like Tim said, just throw your questions in the chat. So let's jump straight in. If you end up signing up for Doctorum, here's what you would get. The Doctorum, by the way, is for aspiring heads of school, senior administrators, and trustees. And so if you're one of those, this is the program for you. Who is it not for? It's not necessarily for people who are only academic administrators, unless they desire to be leading organizationally and doing some of the big picture things. And so this right here shows what a given month would look like. So in the month of July, which is assessing and aligning your leadership team, you would have these videos that you would click on and then tools that you go through as well. So that's the content. Then we would come together on a monthly basis with all the other heads of school and share some lessons from the month. We would have a couple activities that we would do together on Zoom. And then this is also what the coaching call would be at. So it's that 3-chord strand of coaching, content, and cohort each month. So that's just an example of what you would gain access to. Let's transition now I'm going to zoom through these months and give you a little appetizer for each month, what we would accomplish and what you would benefit from in a given month. So if you join us in July, the first thing we do is baseline your school so that we have something to measure against at the end of 12 months. We think that the goal of the program is transformation, not just of your leadership, but of your school. And that happens through time and truth and effort. And so it's about getting reps and moving in the same direction. And so we do an evaluation of your whole school across 4 areas: marketing and admissions, fundraising and facilities, finance and operations, and then teaching and learning. The main business of an academy is teaching and learning, but those other 3 areas, the backstage areas, they really have an impact on whether your school stays at 100 students, 200 students, 300 students. We think we have to tend to both. In many ways, the factory model of education has infiltrated public schools throughout the 20th, 21st century. What we're trying to do in classical is return to a tried and true methodology so that our students love what lasts. But sometimes our schools can hover beneath 100 students because we don't tend to the entire institution. We want to have institutional intelligence, so we don't want to get obsessed with buildings, bodies, and budgets and let the tail wag the dog, but there's financial fundraising facilities work to be done. We just want to make sure we're doing it in a distinctly and consistently Christ-centered and classical fashion. So we also guide you on how to do a leadership team or a retreat with your leadership team or with your board. We think that the summer is a great time to do that. So July is, whether you start in August or September, we think July is a good time to do that. In August, we're going off assuming that your school year starts in August or September. So we talk about starting the year well. We've actually done a separate webinar on how to start the year well with your teachers, with your students, with your parents, and with any other external stakeholders like grandparents. So we go through that in August just to make sure everybody's planned up to have a great start of the year and make a great first impression in August. And then we want to make sure that the calendrical model really in July, we hit the ground running because, and I'll go through this, but we want you to give information to your faculty and your families and your friends, your donors, so that they know what's coming for the whole year. So we want to have a predictable and supportive school environment. That's independent school management or ISM language. So we want you to have a calendrical communication plan. So we do that in August. We're moving along to the third month, September. September is for the annual agenda. This is a big tool in ISM, but we think makes a lot of sense just for healthy planning. And the head and the board should have a set of their key institutional difference makers for the year listed out. So what we would do in the cohort is we would share what's your annual agenda, and we have each different head of school or trustee present, and then we go through them together. I'm also a fan in September of forming book groups with new families. We often read Dr. Tim Dernlan's book, 100 Common Questions, which is a small read. One of my favorite questions in there is classical Christian education just a retreat behind a castle wall with a moat around it? Are we just trying to shelter our kids from the world? And he says, no, it's actually like a greenhouse, and we're preparing them to be repotted out in different soil, but to have strong roots once they leave the safety of the greenhouse. So I like in September to welcome your new families with starting some book clubs. That's an idea that we talk about. And September's on the board as well. So I'm a big fan of having the board. Hopefully they're aware of Tim Dernlan's book, 100 Common Questions, but we want our boards to be reading content that's going to sometimes help them grow in classical Christian education, other times reading books on what healthy governance looks like. October, that's when we get into finance. Private school finance is really not that complicated. In some ways, it's like running an airline. Once the plane takes off, that's how many passengers you have for the full year. It's not the exact same as an airplane, but the name of the game, I've heard David Goodwin say this, is running your school at full capacity. Many of you listening today might have many empty seats, or maybe you have the opposite problem and you're running out of space. So wherever you're at, you should be in the fall gearing up for setting tuition and publicizing it to your families. And so errors to avoid are basing your tuition on anecdotes that you hear from parents. Oftentimes, boards are afraid to raise tuition because disgruntled parents go up to them, and these disgruntled parents with maybe 7 kids go up to them and share that, we're going to get priced out if you increase tuition. And so they get a little gun shy. The other error is to not charge what it costs. And so we want our schools to be setting a price that enables them to break even and then to invest in their future. But, the school that I lead, we're not there yet. Many of you probably aren't there yet, but we want to be setting tuition each year such that we're actually projecting a tuition for the next 3 years. So this was one of my favorite months in the first year of Doctorum, to see people present the document that they send to their families. It was amazing because then the documents that went to these 18 different schools, they were so much better than they would have been because they were compared to others. Let's go to November. We talk about keeping classrooms full and making sure we're operating at full capacity. So we give some ideas for that on how to do open houses, how to retain your current families. We all know that if you have a high school, it's much harder to retain those families. So we get into how it's different between lower school and upper school. We share some of the things that different ACCS accredited schools have been doing to be successful. all with the goal of making sure that your schools are moving towards full capacity, which is really defined by you and your context, but we want to help you hit your goals. And so that's what the focus of November is. Moving on to December, interviewing, training, and evaluating faculty. Whether you do an explicit intent to return form or not, you tend to know in December, January, you're starting to get a feel of which teachers are going to come back the next year, and you'll have a basic assessment of what your hiring needs are. Our goal for every school that goes through Doctorum is to enter into the summer with all of their next year's hires made. And so we like the month of December to be involved in assessing the personnel to see what recruitment you need to do and what retention is going to look like. So there's some HR type tools that we talk about during December. Let's move on to January. For January, we actually take a step back and review some of the content from the book, Growing a Classical School. And we go through 6 case studies. Well, the book has 6 case studies. I think the course, we just do a couple of them. But we compare a school in adolescence to a school in infancy to a school that's further along in the maturity journey. And so when you baseline your school, you will assess whether you're in adolescence, whether you're in a more mature state that we call prime. So we do that baseline at the beginning, and hopefully we could take steps to prepare you for the next stage. We also take a step back in January and review the rule of life, because you start to wear a little thin mid-year, and we want to make sure we're holding each other accountable to being invested in the Word, and also modeling a life of scholae, a life of leisure, where we're having a habit of being contemplative and reading great books, reading books that form the right habits of the heart. Otherwise, we're going to be no different than just generic Christian school administrators. February, strengthening student culture is the focus. So we get into the house system, student discipline. We had some great conversations this year with how to respond to different issues with students that come about in our schools. As a school grows, and especially as a school has a high school, it's great to have some peers who you can ask, is this a kid that needs a little heavier hand on the consequence, or how should I respond to this? And we do a lot of scenarios that aren't just scenarios, that are people's real situations that we work through together. We also have a great unit in Doctorum where a few experienced ACCS accredited schools sit together and explain their house systems, one from Ambrose and one from Bayshore, and they talk about how they set up their house system. So really, we're trying to integrate in Doctorum some of the best that ACCS has to offer, and tailoring it to what we think are the time-specific needs of each month. So February is about house system and student discipline. Let's go to March, funding the vision and campus improvement. Now, if your school has more money than you need, you can skip this month. But if you need help developing resources so you can improve your space, so you can expand your campus, so you can find space for your growing school, then this is the month where we go through the case for support. We are indebted to Brad Leyland and the focus group. He wrote the book, Turning Donors into Partners. So we try to use that book and apply it in a classical Christian perspective, and spend some time working up to annual fund and capital campaign. So to become a certified head of school, part of that is doing a case for support that you present, which is a fundraising piece. And so we want to do that in a distinctly and consistently Christ-centered and classical fashion. And so that's what will happen in the month of March. This is something that's done in Accelerator and Doctorum, and almost every time, I think I've done this with more than 50 different schools, they always point to that one being one of the most helpful pieces of the program. Okay, let's move to April. We'll get just a couple months left. April is about ACCS accreditation and building the rhetoric school. Less than, the stats have probably changed, but less than, oh wow, I want to say the number correctly. Let's say this, a small percentage of our schools have, a smaller percentage of our schools than we would like are K through 12. Many of them get stuck at K through 8. I'm speaking as someone who goes pre-K through 10, and it is so hard to add the rhetoric school and to build it to its full capacity. So it's a a flowering stage of the trivium and a beautiful part of your institution. So we devote some time to that. We spend some time talking about the 30 plus accreditation standards and how they're meant to help your school improve. So that's April. So really this program is for schools that want to be ACCS accredited or are ACCS accredited. This is the only program of its kind that's pulling together the coaching, the content, and the cohort at this point. Really, in many ways, it's like if you thought about going to get a master's or a doctorate, or maybe you already have that, but you want something that's practical that you can immediately apply, that's what this is geared towards. So if you're just looking for theory, this is not the right course. But if you're looking for things that you can take from theory to practice very quickly, then this could be a great course for your head of school or for one of your trustees. Let's go to May, creating and following a strategic plan. It is the month of May 2024 when this is being presented. And so it feels good to be presenting this to you and to have just finished my board retreat, to have just finished my admin retreat, and to have tended to the strategic plan. And, you know, our school has had that calendrical cadence since, oh, wow, at least 3 years, but probably more. So if you get your school on this calendrical cadence where you follow agendas, you use retreats, you do strategic planning, it doesn't make things easier, but it makes hard things better. And so there are some schools that don't yet need a strategic plan. Often they're startup schools. Other times culture and operations are really important. But at some point, every school needs to have a multi-year vision of what the school is seeking to become. And so we have a process that we share. Bill Mott, who is the author of some really helpful books on governance, he's one of the experts that's in our videos. Other people that are in the content are Ben Merkel, the president of New St. Andrews, Robbie Hinton, the headmaster at Ferry Christian, Joe Rigney, a professor at New St. Andrews. There's some really helpful content experts that you'll get to meet throughout Doctorum in the content. Last but not least is your elevator pitch for classical Christian education. This is the pitch that you can give on the bleachers at a volleyball match or at a baseball game. So this is where you in a minute or two are able to explain what your school does. What I like to say is that we teach kids to learn to love what lasts. At Coram Deo Academy, we agree with Plato, who said that the point of education is to learn to love what is worth loving. So what we do is we focus on formation. We prioritize the permanent things and we elevate the essentials that are eternally relevant. And so we do this through laying a Christ-centered foundation, and then we use the liberal arts and sciences so that our students can discern what is true and then declare it with goodness and beauty. So that sort of honing and refinement and practice we do together in community. And then once you clarify your pitch, you cascade it out to your employees and you get them to be ambassadors and evangelists for your school. So there it was in about 20 minutes. The final thing that I would say about the 12 months of Doctorum is, depending on how your school baselines, not everyone is going to end up in the same place because we all start in different places. But what we're promising with Doctorum is that we can get you forward from one stage to the next in the institutional apprenticeship. So we use these 12 modules of content. We use the monthly coaching as well as the monthly group cohort to together advance your school. We hope that it's a blessing to the next cohort, and I'll turn it back over to Dr. Timothy Dernlan to answer some questions and maybe chat with Aaron Hansen a little bit.
Thanks so much, Dave. That was really helpful. In the next 10 to 15 minutes, we'd like to answer questions specifically about how the Doctorum operates and answer questions about specific content that Dave touched on. So if you have specific content questions about when should we propose that budget, how do you do that, we're willing to answer any of those and talk about those now. So Aaron Hansen, if you'd like to jump on with us, and if you all just want to unmute, we can just have a conversation with that could be helpful here. So one thing to clarify, Dave, in the doctorum program, it seems that there is a monthly meeting with a cohort that is led in a group setting online, and then there's individual coaching calls, and there's video readings and other homework throughout that month. Is that a fair assessment of how the monthly cycles run?
Yeah. Yep. Aaron, if you had to guesstimate how many hours you gave in a week or in a month to preparing, and I'm sure, like on average throughout the year, what would you say it is?
Well, as you described, it's the first month is the heavier month in trying to analyze your school. That takes a lot of hours there. But after that, I would say maybe somewhere between 5 and 10 of watching the videos, reading up on the material. It's enough that I could squeeze it in different areas without feeling overburdened.
That's helpful to hear, Aaron. This we did just complete completing our first year, and we were hopeful that it wouldn't be overburdensome, but it would just be a good amount. And then there's a lot of extensive tools. So we're going to come back to this slide in a second. That's where you'll find a lot of information. That website address is on our main website, and you can find the pricing and other information. But Dave, can you go to one of the slides that shows some of the one more back? Yeah, right there. So I wanted to talk briefly. So first, Dave, what's the cost of this program for the entire year?
Look on the website.
Oh, okay. It's $2,400, I believe. So $2,400. Really trying to keep it cost effective for folks. That was a question that came online. Again, throw questions if you have questions online. But talk us through, you and Aaron. Why don't you tell us all the details? This is just for the month of July, right? And tell us about that and August, how all of that works. There's a lot of content to this program and the tools.
Sure, I'll go first, and then Aaron, if you want to chip in anything from the user experience.
Mhm.
The so takeaway, the program tends to be an hour or two per week in terms of the work that you have. The monthly call is an hour. The monthly coaching call is half an hour, and so that gives you a sense of the scope of what's required. So, there might be seasons of life where it'd be good to wait a year, but for most people, it's just you're going to work at least 45 hours every week if you can give one of those hours to tithing into your own development. So I wanted to follow up there. To your question here, July is a heavy lift because you're baselining your leadership team and your whole school. So that institutional apprenticeship self-evaluation is where you'll self-diagnose what stage in the school life cycle your school is in. And then we'll be going through that. And then you develop 3 organizational goals that we try to talk about every single month. And we put in a lot of time to making sure those 3 organizational goals that we go 3 for 3 over the 12 months. So that's the main thing in July.
Was
And
there
then
a specific tool, Aaron, like one of the forms or tools that really helped your school going through it, or you personally? Do you remember one at all, or not really?
Yes, I think I can stretch back that far. One of the first parts of the tools is going through each section of your organization and seeing how it aligns with the accreditation standards. And even though we're not at the point right now of even pursuing accreditation, it was just really helpful to break that out to really focus what my forward vision is. Again, it's not like teaching towards the test, but it's going, yeah, we're really weak in this area, and it was helpful to formally assess that so I could
Sure.
plan accordingly.
Yeah, and as you're making little decisions, knowing how they could lead toward accreditation is helpful. So you don't have to go back and do things if you want to prepare for accreditation. And after 30 years, we have some good standards for accreditation that are helpful to schools. So, Dave, I think I cut you off. Did you have a couple other things to say on this?
I would just mention in August, there's some templates we offer I don't know how other heads of school and trustees, well, I actually do know how other heads of school and trustees approach it. I was gonna say, I don't know how they approach this, but I actually know how like 18 of them approach this. I don't know how you approach this if you're watching the webinar, your parent orientation at the beginning of the year, or if you do a house induction ceremony, but we're big on sharing templates and examples. So you can always find stuff on the Member Resource Center, but we try to give an explanation and organize everything for you. So if you do an assembly, well, we give you an example of how your assembly could be set up, and then we share some of those. And so, yeah, we're trying to put a lot of golf clubs in your bag so that whatever the Lord puts in your path in August, you feel like you have a library of resources to back up your growth. So we're trying to be tools based so that you can move towards mastery as a leader.
Yeah. And so there's a couple other questions in here, and we have a variety of classical Christian schools. One question goes along with that. Someone's wanting to know if a headmaster is overseeing a hybrid model school, would this program be helpful? Certainly, you'd be eligible. The question is, am I eligible? And the program will absolutely be helpful as well. So we're open to pod schools, micro schools, hybrid schools, 4-day-a-week schools, 5-day-a-week schools, K through 6 institutions, K through 12 institutions, any of the above. And it's focused on growing our depth of heads of school. And if you're not currently a head of school, it's open to you as well. We've had a couple folks going through that already. Another question that we have posted on here is, would this program be beneficial for a school in its infancy? And Rainey, my answer on that is it can be, but we also have a 4-month intensive program that's it's called the Accelerator, and that's for startup schools and schools in their first 3 to 4 years. And so that one might be more beneficial for you to go through first. So you just have to figure out if you want to really focus on your specific leadership and it helps the whole school as well, or if you still need foundational elements more for a startup school. So if you're in the infancy stage as a school, I would say sign up for the Accelerator. It's a 4-month class, very much like this. And if you're wanting to grow specifically as a head of school and your whole institution, the Doctorum program. So do you agree with that, Dave? You're leading schools through both of them.
Yeah, I've had people that go through the Accelerator, then wait and come over to the Doctorum. I tend to encourage people to wait a little bit if their school's in its first couple years. Because if your school's less than, I don't know, 50 students, a lot of this content gets more and more relevant once your school is
Has a little maturity and has some other
50 to 500 students. I know it's a huge range. Different ones of these months are going to feel more pressing to different schools at various stages. But I would say if like you're just a principal and the board is really acting like the head of school, where they're doing all the facilities, finance, fundraising, where you're having monthly board meetings and you're talking about mowing the grass and whether you should rent or buy or copy, or if you want to break out of that stage and do it in a Christ-centered, gracious, incremental way, this could be a good course. But um, we have even people that haven't started. We did have a guy this year that hadn't even started his school, and he was pretty bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, high-capacity leader. So it might be too big of a bite for some people, but they can just email me at dseibel@ACCS if they have any more specific questions.
And you did mention too, boards breaking out of operational to strategic. We do have the consulting group Compagnon. I just led a board retreat for 2 days for a board that wanted to do just that. And we really worked with the board. So what we're saying here is we have options for you. If it's our mission to help schools to grow in all of these ways. And I think that our schools now can have an opportunity to be much more mature and stable than some of the ones that started 30 years ago who helped figure out the plan. So it doesn't look like we have too many other questions. Aaron, do you have any other thoughts or comments about specific ways that you've you've been blessed by this, or your specific leadership has improved, or ideas that have been generated for your school by going through the Doctorum program. I'm really thankful that you're part of this. So we have 18 folks going through it right now. And as you said before, you're founding head of school and you've been there for about a decade or so there at Mirus.
Yeah, there's many benefits to it. I think one is you get to be with fellow sufferers. You sometimes think as you're going through it and what you're dealing with, maybe on the board level or on the parent level, that you're all alone. But it's really helpful to get the wisdom from other people. So I think it's a pretty easy sell, even though we're a small school. It was a pretty easy sell even to my board to say, look, I want to invest in becoming a better headmaster. And so for them to invest in that, that was really not that much. And one of the great things that I enjoyed about it is that it's a year long. So it didn't feel like I was drinking out of a fire hydrant and trying to retain that for the whole school year. It's continuous. It's the coaching calls are helpful for check-ins because you can go off script and deal with certain aspects that you might be encountering right at that moment. So I found it beneficial in all those ways.
That's super encouraging. I know that that Dr. Seibel, Dr. Johnson, and I worked hard on it for a couple of years. Those two guys had worked on it for quite a while before I joined the team, and that's what we were hopeful for, keeping it at a low price point. Some folks have said, I can't believe you're not charging $10,000 or $12,000 for this, but we really want to keep it at a low price point and be helpful. So I'm gonna let Dave, share a last few words, and then we'll wrap up.
I'm just looking at the attendees on this particular webinar, or if someone watches the recording later, the current attendees, I know some of you, and I'm glad you guys are on this call. I'm encouraged that you're only a few days away from your school year being over, or you've just finished your school year at this point. I know some of you Michigan people, you go deep into the summer. You guys just start so late. I think of Doctorum in many ways. It's similar to spring training. Yes, it is the whole year, but it would be totally fine if someone who's 30 years in the game is in the same cohort call as 3 years in the game, because in spring training, you have guys that make $150 million over a couple year span next to someone who is going to get cut after spring training. Because the best players every single year need to work on the fundamentals. And these are the 12 fundamentals of what it means to run a school well. We also are interjecting the philosophy and theology throughout. We don't just assume that. So I have the book Good to Great right here, which is an okay book, but it's rooted in empiricism. And so we're bringing our classical Christian philosophical assumptions to bear in a Christ-centered community. We don't want our offerings at the ACCS to be the exact same as another body, another association, because we want to be operating, growing all of our leadership up out of the same soil of our philosophy of our education. Philosophy of education and philosophy of leadership, they should be complementary. And so even if you're someone who's been a head of school for a long time, we really think that you should consider joining Doctorum. Not only will it add value to the cohort to have more experienced headmasters. We had some headmasters that were experienced from ACCS accredited schools in this first cohort, but we'd love to see that mix between the older and the younger schools. I always think of Joy in classical Christian education, joining older and younger. Joy, you get it? And we want to see that happen in Doctorum. So this hill is too steep to climb alone. And the bigger the piece, the bigger puzzle that you're putting together, the more pieces there are, the more puzzlers you need at the table. And so you're going to be making decisions in the next year, and you want to have a multitude of wise counselors. So Doctorum would love to be one of them, and I hope that you'll consider joining us.
Excellent. The next cohort starts. Can you add the last slide, Dave? Go back to the last slide. The next cohort starts July 7th. So sign up now so that you can have your spot there. And you can go to that link there on classicalchristian.org is the information about all of the institute. So whether it's the startup program, the board training, this doctorum, and email Dave, email myself. We want to help. We want to serve. We love you all. Congratulations on wrapping up another school year, as you've done that last week, and those of you that are doing it in the next few weeks. And we hope to see you at the Repairing the Ruins conference and encourage each other. Aaron, thanks for making time. I'm really happy to see you again. It was good to connect with you a couple years ago, and I've just been so encouraged by you, and I'm so thankful that you've been here with us, Aaron.
Thank you. I appreciate all the hard work that you guys are doing behind the scenes.
Very good. Very good. God bless you all. Hope to see some of you in the doctorum program. And may God bless you and keep you and give you strength for the work he's prepared for you today and in leading these schools. It's making a difference. Have a good day.